We're all excited to see what the Panthers 2024 rookie class is able to do this season, but what are fair and reasonable expectations for all 7 of their draft picks? I'll tell you right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Subscribe or follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council, where on Fridays throughout the offseason, I'm right here on the show answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions, either at me or DM me over on Twitter at Julian Council to get your questions in for this week's edition of the weekly Friday mailbag right here on Locked On Panthers. OTAs are going on right now here in Carolina, and yeah, they're on the field. Good to hear from Dave Canales. Good to hear from Bryce Young and from JC Horn on Monday. But not a ton is going on. We're getting to see the rookie class out there with the whole team for the first time, which is obviously great as they get integrated into Dave Canales' scheme, along with all the returning players here in Carolina. So on today's show, I want to focus in on the rookie class, not OTAs. I want to focus on the rookie class and discuss what the fair and reasonable year one expectations are for Xavier Legette, Jonathon Brooks, Trevin Wallace, Ja'Tavion Sanders, Chau Smith-Wade out of Washington State, Jaden, Crumedy, and Michael Barrett, the 7-man draft class here in Carolina in 2024. Also, going to be joined by a guest to give us the fair expectations for Chau Smith-Wade. So we'll get to that later on here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. We'll start off, though, with the first 4 picks of the draft for Carolina, and those guys all coming in with, I would think, more increased expectations than the last 3 head into the 2024 season. Now, I think there's an argument to be made that maybe one of them doesn't have those expectations that you may place on someone like a Chau Smith-Wade, but we'll get into that here on the show. Starting off with Xavier Legette. The Panthers decided that they could not wait one more day. They needed to get their guy, and they traded up with Buffalo from 33 to 32 to get Xavier Legette out of South Carolina, and to also get the 5th-year option, which will only matter if Legette turns out to be an impact player. He has 3 seasons to find out, or to show at least that he is worth the Panthers exercising the 5th-year option and doing more, like giving him an extension and him potentially becoming the number 1 wide receiver here in Carolina. Heading into the season, though, looking at Diontae Johnson and Adam Thielen, their presence in Carolina, I would expect Legette to start off as wide receiver 3. Now, I don't know how he's being deployed so far during OTAs, and Dave Canales had talked about how there's guys who are going to typically play on the outside are going to get a chance to play in a slot, and then vice versa. We'll start seeing roles be established once training camp begins at the end of July. Then we go into the preseason games. That's when we'll really find out where Legette stands and where Jonathan Mingo stands and where Terrace Marshall Jr. stands and all the other wide receivers behind Adam Thielen and Diontae Johnson on the depth chart. But looking last year at the 4 wide receivers that were taken in the first round, I feel like that's the best way to evaluate potentially what Legette can provide to Carolina. Jackson Smith and Jigba in a very similar situation where he went to Seattle. They have 2 veteran wide receivers in DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. He's not expected to put up big-time numbers, 63 receptions, 628 yards, and 4 touchdowns. I would take that right now if Xavier Legette can do that for Carolina. Absolutely, especially when you compare with Jonathan Mingo, a 2nd-round pick 39, not too far from 32, what he did last year for Carolina, which was 43 receptions, 418 yards, and 0 touchdowns. Give me the 20 more receptions, give me the 210 more yards, and give me the 4 more touchdowns. Hell, just give me 4 touchdowns, period, and I'm happy with that. Quentin Johnson out of TCU went to the Chargers, also playing behind Mike Williams, who got injured, and behind Keenan Allen. 38 receptions, 431 yards, 2 touchdowns, similar numbers to Mingo. I would like to see more than that, But you have to understand, too, Legette's coming from a breakout season where before that, he hadn't produced a lot. We talked about the injuries, the loss of his parents, and the changing coaching staffs, quarterback situations down there in Columbia that could have led to that. Totally understand that. Different ball game. Now he's stepping into the NFL. So I don't think the expectation should be that he's going to have a 1,000-yard receiving season again. I don't think anyone should reasonably feel that way. But you would definitely want to see him get more than what Quentin Johnson put up last year, as those are pretty comparative numbers than Jonathan Mingo. Now, the situation is always important. And the guys he had around him, he was not going to be the number one target. He also had Justin Herbert. So you maybe would expect it a little bit better output from Quentin Johnson last year if you're a Chargers fan. Now, I don't sit here and watch all the Chargers games, just looking at the numbers and what I saw from him back at TCU, where I thought he was outstanding that season. They went to the national championship. I personally would like to see more out of Xavier Legette than that. Zay Flowers was outstanding last year for Baltimore, playing in really a wide receiver one role, 77 receptions, 858 yards, 5 touchdowns, understanding the Ravens are a team that run the football a ton. I am not expecting a Zay Flowers type of season. Zay Flowers coming out of Boston College, loved the guy, thought he was the best receiver on the board, and he turned out to be one of, if arguably the best receivers to come out of college last year. I don't feel the way I felt about Flowers then and now about Xavier Legette. Does not mean that he cannot put up those numbers. I just don't think that's a fair expectation. I do not think that he is going to be Zay Flowers, quite honestly, in the NFL. Jordan Addison, who replaced Adam Thielen. They felt pretty comfortable, the Vikings did, moving on, knowing they had a first-round pick. Jordan Addison, 70 receptions, 911 yards, 10 touchdowns. That's not even with having Kirk Cousins out there all season long. And also had to step up as Justin Jefferson missed a ton of time with a hamstring injury. Again, not numbers I'm expecting Legette to match just based off of what the opportunity likely is going to be presented to him this year, starting out as wide receiver 3, having Deontay Johnson as the top receiver, playing at the X, and also being that primary read. Puka Nacua was the best receiver out of all those drafted last year, and he was drafted in the 5th round. 105 receptions, 1,486 yards, 6 touchdowns. I don't think we're going to have a diamond in the rough kind of season like that, as Legette's not a diamond in the rough. He's a guy who was drafted in the 1st round, would have been a 2nd rounder at Carolina, not wanting to get that 5th-year option. I just feel like, reasonably looking at it, if he can put out a Jackson Smith-Njigba season of 63 receptions, or about 50, 55, 60, 600 plus yards, 4, 5 touchdowns, I'm happy about that. I do think that would show the kind of promise that he has in Carolina, especially going to the next season, where if Deontay Johnson comes back or if he's just a rental, we'll see. He will be ascending into at least, at minimum, wide receiver 2 spot. And is it possible that he works his way to that this season? Because if he's putting up those numbers, assuming that Johnson's going to have a big season, as long as a wide receiver, as long as Bryce plays at the expectation I think he is expected to play at this year, playing much better than last season, having protection, I think that could be fair for Xavier Legette heading in to this upcoming season. Jonathon Brooks out of Texas, I am looking at it 2 different ways. I'm looking at him as a guy coming off an ACL, which obviously is something you should take into account, considering that it's a significant knee injury. Yes, clean tear, as they say, but he's not out there right now fully participating. We are not quite sure whether he'll be fully participating once training camp begins. But I also look at him as a 1st-round running back type of value player, because Carolina did trade back up into the 2nd round to take him. You don't take a running back in the 2nd round and talk about versatility unless you mean to use that running back extensively this upcoming season. The top 2 backs taken last year were Bijan Robinson, also out of University of Texas, and Jahmyr Gibbs out of Alabama. Bijan had 214 carries for 976 yards and 4 touchdowns. A lot of arguments down there in Atlanta that Arthur Smith, the former head coach there, did not use him enough, and you won't get an argument from me. Jahmyr Gibbs up in Detroit was outstanding, 182 carries, 945 yards, 10 touchdowns, and he has that versatility, being able to catch the football out of the backfield. We saw it with Bryce Young in that one season he spent at Alabama after transferring from Georgia Tech. Zach Charbonnet was the only 2nd-round running back taken out of UCLA. Last year, he had 108 carries, 462 yards, and a touchdown. I feel like the fair assessment of Brooks this year, as far as expectations should be, is somewhere in between what Robinson and Gibbs did and what Charbonnet did. He's coming off the injury, but I expect there to be more opportunities than what Charbonnet got last year. I do expect that Chuba Hubbard's going to start off as RB1, but as the season goes along and as Brooks gets healthier, gets his win back, and provides the versatility, I'm expecting him to be the number one running back here in Carolina. So I could see 750, 800. That would make sense to me as long as he bounces back the way that I believe he can bounce back this season. So that's my expectation. Like, I expect Xavier Legette to, at minimum, be wide receiver 3, but have a chance to get to wide receiver 2, just knowing that Adam Thielen is 34 years old and is going to be taking a step back this year just based off of the other players that are here on this offense. Jonathon Brooks, I'm expecting him to come in, compete for the number one job. Chuba's going to probably start off there. But as they see that Brooks fits what they want to do more, as they are already aware of, and what Dave Canales brought up about the versatility on draft night, I think he's going to be RB1 by the second half of the season. Third round pick, Trevon Wallace, linebacker out of Kentucky. Not high expectations for him at all. When you have Josie Jewell and you have Shaq Thompson here as your starting linebackers, as long as those guys are healthy, they should play the bulk of the snaps. I would like to see Wallace find a way to make it some sort of rotation where he is out there getting a decent amount of snaps every Sunday. I just think he's going to be more of a special teams guy than someone who's going to come in and immediately contribute. Now, as far as going down to the future, you would like to see him get some burn. I don't know if it's taking Shaq Thompson out the field or Josie Jewell out the field, but I would like to see Wallace out there. I don't expect him to play a high percentage of snaps this season just based off of who's in front of him and the experience that those guys have. But I do expect him to get a little bit of run as they do look ahead to 2025 and beyond there at the inside linebacker spot. Then Ja'Tavion Sanders, the 4th round pick out of Texas. A lot of people excited to see what he can do in Carolina. I already came out and said this is my favorite pick of the draft because the Panthers were unable to bring any of the Seattle Seahawks tight ends and any other tight end in free agency over here to elevate what is the worst tight end room in the NFL and still is until further notice. We have to see what Ja'Tavion Sanders can do in the NFL before saying that tight end room is not as the bottom of the NFL. Tommy Tremble Hive, I know how y'all feel about him. I think he's a good player. I think he's somebody worth investing in as that number 2 tight end. I do feel like Ja'Tavion Sanders coming in can help him. I think it also can help Ian Thomas and can help Stephon Sullivan. I just don't think that either of those guys are high-end tight end talent in the receiving game. Now, Tommy Tremble can be a very good blocking tight end and then someone you can go to as that secondary tight end passing option. But let's be honest. Who are you trying to get the football to on third down or just on first, second down? You want to get the ball to Brooks before you want to get the ball to Tommy Tremble? You want to get the ball to Chuba Hubbard before Tremble? You want to get the ball to Deontay Johnson, to Xavier Legette, to Adam Thielen? There are a host of guys you want to see touch the ball before Tommy Tremble, and that's not a bad thing because what that means is Carolina has positioned themselves to have more weapons than they had last year. Last season, we got to a point where it's like, damn, Adam Thielen, and I guess if you're not going to run the football, throw it to Tommy Tremble because the other guys aren't getting open, and that was a problem. They should not have that problem this year. I like what Ja'Tavion Sanders potentially can bring to Carolina as a true pass-catching tight end. He's going to have to work on his run blocking to really elevate and be able to stick around in one spot. As we've seen guys like Hayden Hurst bounce around the league. We've also seen a guy like CJ Uzomah bounce around the league because they're not great blockers. You got to be a great blocker if you want to also be a guy who gets paid big money and stays in one spot. Luke Musgrave, Tucker Kraft, they were drafted in the 2nd and 3rd round, respectively, out of Green Bay. The Packers utilized their tight ends a ton last year. As rookies, Musgrave had 34 receptions, 352 yards, and a touchdown. Tucker Kraft had 31 receptions, 355 yards, and 2 touchdowns. That is better than what the Panthers got out of their tight ends last year. And if that is what you get out of a rookie Ja'Tavion Sanders, you take it. You want more, but you have to take it, especially knowing that he should not be your primary option. There should be 3 other guys at minimum in a passing game that you're going to before you're going to Ja'Tavion Sanders, and also knowing that Tommy Tremble is going to get opportunities. And maybe Stephon Sullivan, if he makes the roster, gets opportunities. Ian Thomas, despite what he did on Monday, we know who he is. I don't think he should be getting those opportunities in pass game over Ja'Tavion Sanders. So I think he's someone who can come in, make an impact immediately, and those could be his high water mark as far as receptions go. I don't expect anything more out of that. I don't think it's fair to expect more out of that. Just knowing who's coming back and who has really come in to this offensive scheme heading into 2024. So I'm excited to see what those 4 guys can do heading into the season, primarily what Legette, Brooks, and Sanders can do, and Wallace in small bits and pieces, what he can do on defense this season. What about Chau Smith-Wade? What does he provide to Carolina? Instead of me giving you expectations for next season, why don't I bring in Jessamyn McIntyre? She is the sideline reporter for Washington State football. She covered Chau Smith-Wade throughout his entire career there on the Blues at Washington State. She joins us next here on Locked On Panthers. When it comes to your financial future, you think you've done it all. You've saved, you've researched, you've invested all that you can. Now you need to take those investments to the next level by using what every financial great uses, Yahoo Finance. For more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. Whether you're a seasoned investor or looking for that extra guidance, Yahoo Finance gives you all the tools and data you need in one place. They are the #1 finance destination, producing a holistic look at the financial news cycle, including breaking news, original editorial perspectives, analyst ratings, independent research, customizable charts, and so much more. Securely link your brokerage account for a unified view on your wealth, including 401k and other investments. A comprehensive package is what sets apart great investors, and it's how Yahoo Finance ensures you have the insight to look at your wealth in its entirety. With a community of over 90 million each month, there's real strength in helping you on your way to financial success. For comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor, Yahoo Finance, the #1 financial destination, yahoofinance.com. That's yahoofinance.com. Back here on Locked On Panthers, as we're talking about what are fair and reasonable expectations for the rookie class, I decided, why should I tell you what I think Chau Smith-Wade can do this year when I could just talk to somebody who's covered them the last couple of seasons there at Washington State, Jasmine McIntyre. She is a sideline reporter for Washington State football. You can also hear her on KJR in Seattle, and she is nice enough to join the show today. Jasmine, how you doing?
Great now. This is awesome. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And thank you for doing this. I know time zones can be difficult out there in the great Pacific Northwest, which I love the PNW, love Seattle. That's one of my favorite regions of the country when I'm not here, of course, in North Carolina, which also I love. But it's really cool to have someone like Chau Smith-Wade coming to Carolina, who comes from a program that has been pretty outstanding, I feel like, considering what the expectations historically have been for Washington State, knowing what Mike Leach did there before he left to go to Mississippi State. Obviously, rest in peace to Mike Leach, and then what Jake Dickert so far has done there on the Palouse. Really excited to see what kind of player Chau Smith-Wade can be for the Carolina Panthers. So let me ask you simply, what are the Panthers getting in Chau Smith-Wade on the field and even off the field as a person?
I would say a steal, considering where you got him. He plays bigger than he is. And one of the things, I was just speaking to Coach Dickert a couple weeks ago, too, and specifically asking about some of the guys that got drafted, because we had a third day guys, I should say. And Chau is one of those, I would say, completely undersized people that plays bigger and always depending or always someone you could depend on the interior, which is tough. That's not where all the accolades come from. The corners are the wide receivers of the defense, and you don't get all of that attention and everything. And one of the biggest things too that Coach Dickert said, because you asked about him as a person, is that the guys that got drafted this year are better people than players. And if you've gotten the chance to see Chau play, that says a lot about who you're getting in a person. He also said he's been a great example for this team. And I've seen it. I've seen it even when, unfortunately, he was hampered by some injury situations towards the latter half of this past season. He was there, and he was warming his guys up, and he was on the sidelines, and that speaks a lot. Also, he's from Chicago. It takes a lot to go to. It's almost like going to Hawaii and spending all 4 years there. You're really, really isolated, and some people don't hang for that long, especially as we're experiencing the world of the NIL right now. He stayed 2020 to 2023, and that was a weird time to come in too during 2020, as we all know.
Yeah.
And he did, and I just think you got a steal of a player in the 5th round.
I also think about this too. You talk about 2020 being weird. This past year has been weird, obviously, for Washington State football and just the athletic department as a whole. And you get injured. You could have thought, if you're Chau, that why stick around? This team is probably going to be breaking up after the season anyways. Nobody knows what the future at that point in time is going to be. He stays around. He could have left, prepared for the draft, because a lot of times, look, Brock Bowers is at Georgia. He came back, he stayed. But what was all the rhetoric from all the people out there? Sit out, no reason to hurt your draft stock, even though it's ridiculous. The guy's going to be a first rounder no matter what happens. And Chau Smith-Wade sides, I'm going to stay there and play with my team. So really great stuff to hear there from Jake Dicker, that story you gave me. How about this? He played outside corner at Washington State, and you tell me he's a smaller guy. Is that something that you could see him potentially with playing in the NFL, just knowing how physical he's been in the past in college? Could that translate maybe to the NFL?
I think it can. I think it can. Like I had mentioned, he does play bigger than he physically is. And you're seeing some of these guys. I mean, you've been around teams. It's insane when you see guys in plain clothes. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
What? How are you doing this? And, it's about the work they put in and the spirit inside of them. I think that they can do whatever they want with Chau when it comes to where they want to position him. But I also think that he is going to show them that he will do literally whatever you ask. He's a good kid. That's all that I've seen from him, and he is there for his team. And I think he will do whatever. And I mean, it's kind of almost rhetoric for Verhees, right? Yeah. Whatever coach wants. But I do believe that. I do believe he will do that. So yeah, I could see him playing that. I've seen that man leap. He's got the hops for it. So I mean, obviously he's going to be in some ridiculous size matchups. So I would see if they didn't play him in those situations, but he can.
Well, I think it speaks to his adaptability to where at the Senior Bowl, that was the first time from all the reports I read that he had played inside at the nickel, and he goes on, has 2 interceptions, becomes the Senior Bowl MVP. Like, is that that's like basically what you're talking about? Like, this guy, he's going to do what coach asks you to do. Okay, I've never played nickel. You want me to do that this week? And you only have like 4 days of practice. I can do it. And he showed he could do it.
Yeah, and I think also what I had heard from Coach Dickert, he said something about when he figured it out off the field, then all of a sudden he became the man he is on the field, and he became better for it. And I think that he might have been referencing learning the playbook and learning, being disciplined and that, that kind of thing. And you saw maturation on the field, which is something that's hard to do, especially when you're dominating at a collegiate level. You were asking about if it translates to the NFL. When you have that adaptability, like you saw in the Senior Bowl, that does translate. So it was really cool to see him for that.
Oh, absolutely. Do you see him as more of like a lead by example guy? Because you talk about him sticking around, or was he a vocal leader within that locker room there at Washington State?
I think that at Washington State, at least during his time there, the vocal leaders were R.J. Stone and Brennan Jackson, and they're the edge rushers, and that tends to be a trend across football at every level. So, but you have your position groups and everything. I saw him being there for his team, and so I wouldn't say a quiet leader, but lead by example for sure.
Okay.
So he wasn't the yeller on the sideline or anything like that. I just saw him work, but not the silent stoic type either.
So the Panthers are getting a guy who plays bigger than his size, someone who can play on the outside, can play on the inside, who shows the adaptability, someone who can be a lead by example guy, but he's always going to be there for his team as well. Yeah, 5th round pick 157. Feels like this may have been a steal for Carolina, and I'm very excited to see what Chau can do here in Carolina. Jessamyn, thank you so much for your time here on the show today and for your insight, especially from Coach Jake Dickert, who's doing a great job out there on the Blues in Pullman, Washington for Washington State. We'll take a quick pause and come back and talk about the 6th and 7th round picks here in Carolina and what to expect from them in 2024. All right, great to catch up with Jasmine McIntyre there of KJR Radio in Seattle. She also is the Washington State Cougars football sideline reporter and gave us a good insight on Chau. I keep saying Chau. So I'm trying to remember. Got to learn all these guys' names. Here's the thing. When I talked to somebody this weekend, and I was just like, okay, is it Legette or Legette? They're like, it's Legette. And I was like, why has he not come out in all these years and told people how to pronounce his name? Just being too nice of a guy. I didn't get he's from the South, small town. He doesn't want to correct people, doesn't want to sound rude. So it's Xavier Legette, Chau Smith-Wade. Don't think we've heard from Chau Smith-Wade yet. At least he has not said his name out loud. That's what I want these guys to do, is come out, tell us your name, say it out loud, let everyone know so we don't get it wrong. So Jadeveon Clowney, not Jadeveon. So Jadeveon, we got Chau and Xavier Legette. All right, moving on. Looking at the Panthers' day 3 picks, the rest of them, Jaden Crumedy, defensive tackle out of Mississippi State, and Michael Barrett, the linebacker out of Michigan. What to expect from these two. Starting out with Crumedy. He's coming into a defensive tackle room that I am very intrigued to see how the depth chart ends up later on this summer and then getting into the fall. As we know, it's going to be Derek Brown's going to be a starter again. Shai Tuttle, he's going to start again after a poor season. And then A'Shawn Robinson is the Deshaun Williams replacement, we believe. This is still the same defensive coaching staff, a couple new faces also in the roster, defensive personnel-wise, but that's the expectation to be the starting 3 in Carolina. Then you have Crumedy, you got Nick Thurman, who really shined out late in the season last year in opportunities, and LeBron Ray. They recently let go of Rayshon Williams, but those are the guys that I feel like Crumedy is really having to battle against. And being a 6th-round pick, it's not like you're automatically on the roster. It helps that the team spent draft capital on you, but also you're pick 200. You have to show promise. You have to show that you are better than these guys and that you can contribute right away. And the Panthers, the depth on the defensive tackle position, on the defensive line across the board last year wasn't good. Yeah, we saw Thurman show some signs, also saw what LeBron Ray could do, but man, I just do not look at this defensive line group outside of Derek Brown and have that many warm, fuzzy feelings about this group. So therein lies an opportunity for Jaden Crumedy to come in here. My expectation is a guy who's going to be fighting for a battle, fighting for a roster spot, a guy who's going to be a rotational defensive tackle, and then hopefully he can be the backup to A'Shawn Robinson and be a run stuffer. Other than that, don't really know what else you could expect out of Crumedy other than just be a rotational defensive lineman, and that's what you are when you get drafted 200th overall in the NFL draft. Looking at Michael Barrett, pick 240, 7th-round pick, linebacker to Michigan, a guy who has played more of that hybrid role. We talked to Isaiah Hull of Locked On Wolverines about this last week. He thinks that he can certainly play closer to the line of scrimmage. That's where he's best off at. But he does think that he's a player who's been undervalued after what he was able to do at Michigan, leaving as the all-time winningest Wolverine. You would hope that would be the case, having played there for 6 years, but winning a national championship this past season, being one of the team captains, team leaders there under Jim Harbaugh at the University of Michigan. He's coming in with expectation mainly just to be a special teams ace. But after some of the reports I read, I read what Matt Miller of ESPN.com had to say, and he loves what Carolina did by taking Michael Barrett even that late. And he felt like he was somebody who was more of a 5th or 6th round pick, not someone taken towards the end of the 7th round. The Panthers maybe get the steal of the draft. Now, Chau Smith-Wade, according to Jasmine McIntyre, he could be a steal. Is it possible that Michael Barrett is really the steal here in Carolina, as he can possibly be a backup to Shaq and Josie, and he can fight Trevin Wallace? And obviously, as a fan, you're probably not wanting to hear Trevon Wallace and Michael Barrett fighting for playing time at inside linebacker, but competition is not a bad thing. And if a player who has a ton of reps, ton of snaps, ton of experience playing on a winning team and a winning program at Michigan is pushing another player coming from Kentucky, where Kentucky has been really good under Mark Stoops, not necessarily a bad thing. And it's not like either one of those guys are going to be expected to provide a ton this year as linebackers. But knowing that if you're in a pinch, you can play linebacker, probably not playing safety, but special teams wise could be an ace for you. I'm expecting Michael Barrett to be on the roster because of how well he plays special teams at Michigan and what he's been able to do as a underrated athlete. And possibly he provides something down the road as a backup linebacker in Carolina. Does not have the measurables that you're looking for at that spot. But who knows, man? Let's not count him out just yet. I do like the story that this potentially could become in Michael Barrett coming to Carolina as a 7th-round pick out of Michigan. So those are my expectations. Year one, the reasonable, realistic ones for the 7-man draft class here in Carolina. And then with Chau, which I didn't really mention, but Chau, yeah, guy's going to be starting off as a backup nickel who hopefully can take over that spot from Troy Hill by the end of the season. So those are my full reasonable expectations for the rookie class here in Carolina in 2024. But it's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all, subscribe or follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council, where on Fridays throughout the offseason, I'm answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions right here on the show. So either at me or DM me on Twitter at Julian Council. But in the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole as always, and forever. Keep pounding, and I'll talk to y'all on Thursday.